Welcome back, everybody, to Even Your Dynasty Show.
We just got breaking news in.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Even Your Dynasty Show. We are here to do, with a little extra bonus coverage, to do Giants' first day draft coverage. They made 2 picks today. Selected infielder Gavin Kilen from Tennessee with the 13th overall pick. And then in the 3rd round, number 85 overall, selected outfielder Trevor Cohen from Rutgers. So we're going to talk a bit about those. Obviously, Giants, we're going to just jump right into it. Obviously, Giants went a little bit in a direction that I think none of us saw coming. I mean, Ricky has mentioned in the past their history with taking, high floor players, but I mean, this wasn't a guy that even remotely got mentioned with the team in the lead up to this draft. So I feel like we all got kind of lulled into this sense of security that they were going to kind of go with a prep upside player or somebody with like measurable upside and ceiling, and they kind of went a different way. I saw, I don't remember if it was Keith Law, but I did see somebody who had a write-up on him, and, it had the famous sentence in there at the very end that said one of the highest floor players in the draft. And I was like, yep, that's just what Giants fans want to hear. So how you guys doing? What do you guys think?
To put it lightly, this was the highlight of my day, getting me a Barry Bonds bobblehead. So that says all you need to know about my thoughts. But yeah, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, as we like to say, but definitely a very, very underwhelming day one, to say the least.
Yeah. And I'll run through the numbers too. If you guys want, I'll jump through those really quick before we really dive too deep. But Ricky, do you have any opening thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's pretty much exactly like what I said they do all the time. They take corner outfielders with average power, or they take shortstops who project to be second baseman in the future and have limited power, limited throwing arm, and it's always like hit tool over everything else. And it's very concerning that they never seem to really adjust their draft philosophy, because, something I think the three of us really covet is seeing multiple high-end tools, and there are plenty of guys on the board at this point, and they just avoid them each and every time. We mentioned guys like Laviolette, Ike Irish, guys with multiple tools. Ike Irish, where does he go? Another guy we mentioned was the shortstop out of Arkansas. Where does he go? You look at the organizations that are drafting these guys that we mentioned that have higher ceilings and have multiple tools and really good power to lean on, and they're going to organizations that consistently have top hitting prospects in their organizations, something that the Giants never really have outside of Bryce Eldridge. Who else have they really drafted and developed that has any kind of power or multiple tools? And the most concerning thing, like we always mention, is, if this guy doesn't go and hit for a high average, more than likely he has nothing else to lean on. You're leaning on a guy that needs to have a high average and is more than likely going to get plugged in at second base because of a limited throwing arm. So very disappointed. It's part of the reason why we were very high on their draft last year, because it was just power hitter after power hitter after power hitter. And you know what? If they just completely flop on last year's draft, I'm fine with it, because I know that they at least reach for ceilings and guys that they can develop into actually bringing some power into the Giants lineup down the road. I'd much rather take the risk on that, and eventually you run into a superstar power hitting outfielder, first baseman, than going with the high floor, low ceiling guy that craps out when he hits double A.
And to kind of piggyback off your point there, the biggest thing is that when they have a tool such as that, it makes them at least somewhat of an asset in your farm system. And that's something the three of us have been emphasizing for months, it feels like, is having assets in your system. Because, yeah, you know, if you got a guy in your system who's a legit power threat with insane hit tools, but he seems to be blocked at the big league level, or he doesn't pan out in the particular role that you want him to through the farm or while he's coming up, well, guess what? He's an asset that you can flip for something else, for a bigger name, or include him in a trade, down the road. When you're getting guys like this with very, very, limited upside, and that's just putting it very bluntly. That's not even being negatively, especially when you're looking at these two guys that we selected. When they have a very limited upside, or as we mentioned, a low ceiling, if they're not meeting their, like you guys just touched on, as far as hitting for average, which is what you need to get out of guys like this, if they're not doing that, what do they have to offer for a potential deal in the future? They just become another one of your, no names that are in your farm. And, obviously the three of us and Giants fans in general, we hope that these two guys pan out to be absolute superstars. Like, I would want nothing, else but just to say, hey, those two were great picks. But it's really hard to be enthusiastic on day one when you see what was on the board that you left off and what you ended up selecting. I mean, Cody's going to dive into a lot of these, but Cohen, he wasn't even a top 500 player. He was projected undrafted, and you reach for him in the thirds. It's things like that, man. And it's not even you reach for a guy like, oh, well, this dude's got crazy pop, or oh, this dude's got crazy speed. There's nothing in particular that really stands out. So it's just very head scratching in general. But yeah, I wanted to, piggyback off your point and just emphasize the need to have assets in your system. Worry about the position later, draft based on the tools.
Yeah. Yeah. And, he's 21. He's a 3-year starter. Obviously, he started off at Louisville, went over to Tennessee via the transfer portal. And yeah, I mean, you look through his numbers in college, nothing really jumps out tremendously. There's one thing that jumps out, and that's incredibly low strikeout numbers. And they, the hit tool, depending on who you look at, Baseball America had it at 55. MLB Pipeline had it at 60. So, like, yeah, he has one big time tool to hang your hat on, but we've seen it a lot in development for these guys. Hit tools don't always translate into things like batting average and stuff like that in the major or in minors or majors. So when that is your calling card, it better hit, because if it doesn't, like, you're going to be, your value as a prospect's pretty washed. That's why you're looking at trying to get these measurable traits. And ideally, you can get a guy with a big time hit tool that at least has speed. A lot of us didn't want Merrick Houston. I actually texted these guys earlier saying this, where it's like, a lot of us didn't want Merrick Houston, but at least with Merrick Houston, he had a similar graded hit tool, but he also had like plus speed and the thought that he would stick at shortstop. We're talking about a guy with Keelin that the talk is they're confident he's going to get kicked to second, and he doesn't have plus speed, not even a little bit. I mean, Baseball America had him at 45, which that's like basically average foot speed, and MLB Pipeline was a little more generous, which was 50, which is like a tiny bit above average foot speed. So, I mean, it's just concerning. It doesn't mean it's going to be a bust. It doesn't mean like he's not going to end up being a good player. And that's why I'm never going to come out and sit here on the day of the draft and say that's a bad pick, because at the end of the day, he hasn't played a single inning in the minors, majors, anywhere, like any professional innings yet. So I will allow the guy the opportunity to play and see what happens. And before I start crushing it and saying like this was a terrible pick, it's just not, my philosophy on how I would be, approaching the draft. I want more measurable traits with that. But, I see if Limbo doesn't really care for our takes in there, but I can see, looking at what he did in college in At Louisville, hit 265 his freshman year. No home runs, only 10 extra base hits. Sophomore year, hit 330, swung the bat really well, 9 home runs, 35 extra base hits. And then he transferred over to Tennessee. More power from a home run standpoint, less, overall extra base hits, but he hit 357 with an 1100 OPS, 15 home runs, 32 extra base hits. I mentioned the strikeout numbers, only struck out 14 times as a freshman, 22 as a sophomore, 27 as a junior. So, the hit tool, I mean, and we're going to talk about it with the second pick as well. Like it's pretty clear to me that Posey has a type. Like he wants guys that make contact. And clearly he does make contact. Like he's really good in that regard. But I look at the way he hits the ball, and I actually feel like it's a kind of hitter that you'd want in Oracle if you have speed. Like those are the guys like gap to gap, also can go line to line, gap to gap hitters, hit lots of line drives. I love the guy's swing, but you want to pair that with speed, and that it caps his ceiling a little bit. So that's kind of where I struggle with this pick. But yeah, what else you guys got on that?
Well, no, just to emphasize that you've been saying for 2 years, as long as you've been doing this show, that your ideal player in Oracle is going to bring that to the table, is going to hit line to line, gap to gap with speed. So that's why this would be an absolutely exciting pick if he had speed. You know what I'm saying? So it's, and like you mentioned, and it's kind of like what I said on my quick little rant there. It's like, we hope this guy succeeds. We hope he turns into a beast. We hope that he hits 300 plus, swipes you 25 bags, wins a bunch of gold gloves, and just is a cornerstone over at second base. It's just, like I mentioned, it's hard to get excited when you start diving into the numbers. You start diving into the tools. You start looking at his profile. When you start comparing it to how it would translate, at Oracle. When you start diving into all this research, it's like, man, that's really like kind of an underwhelming pick. I feel like they could have addressed, bigger needs with the players that are available on the board at that time. And that, I think that's just where the majority of our disappointment and, 90% of Giants X right now with their posts, if you go and take a look at, that's where it's all stemming from. But yeah, I mean, like you said, he doesn't strike out a lot. That's a plus. I mean, clearly you watch the team right now, and striking out is a damn kryptonite. So, and like you said, we're going to dive into the other pick as well. But it's like you said, it's clear that Buster has the type. He wants guys that make contact and don't strike out. It's just, I think you can pair those up with some players that were on the board that also have another tool that you can bring to the table. Like you said, speed or pop or whatever it may be. So, no, that's just basically how I feel in general about that. But like I said, I hope the dude succeeds. I really do.
Yeah, I will have some silver linings on both picks from a comp perspective. Get to that a little bit later, but yeah, I mean, the biggest issue is kind of like something Cody said before we went live. Not only did they pick the high floor guy with their first pick, but they kind of doubled down and did the same exact thing at an even worse level with their third pick. And if you would have went with your third round pick and got like a high floor or a high ceiling toolsy guy like a Dakota Jordan, that's where you'd be able to, go a little bit easier on this first round pick, because you'd get that one guy that you feel a lot more confident in because he's coming out of an SEC school where he played the highest level of college baseball. And then you go with the high ceiling guy that you feel like you may be able to work with his tools. A guy like I just said, Dakota Jordan, who could throw, run, field, hit for power. He could do everything. And you just needed to really sharpen up the hit tool, almost the exact opposite type of player as what Keelin is with your first pick. So for me, that's the biggest issue is, why are we doubling down? You have a guy who they do view as a center fielder with your second pick. But you're going with a guy who was playing right field and a guy in the first who is what we're told to be more of a second baseman. It's just, I don't know, man. I'm having a hard time coming to grips with it. I don't feel like Keelin's a bad player. It's just, I would like to see a little bit more risk taking going on as far as power goes. You had a guy like Laviolette who had like 70 grade power, and yeah, it may be risky in the first round, but guess what? You're picking at 13. You're not picking in the top 5 where you can't take a risk. I mean, look how many picks they've botched over the years doing the exact same thing they're doing right now. Like Hunter Bishop, even, he had power, but he was more of a late bloomer. It wasn't like some steady, consistent power throughout college. It kind of took off in his final year at Arizona State. It's just guys like that. They need to get away from these safe picks, because all it does is end up hurting them way more in the long run. Like we mentioned, if Keelin doesn't hit for an extremely high average, his trade value is not going to be nearly as high as a lot of these other guys had they picked these other guys that were on the board. Like we mentioned with Ike Irish, that's a guy with very high-end power. And if he just goes and dominates the lower levels of the minors right off the bat, not only can you move him quick being a college bat, but with that power, teams are going to look at that and want a piece of that if you say go in the offseason and try to make a big trade. So, I just would really like to see them change their philosophy. It might be time to take a harder look at what you have in the scouting department and really reevaluate how much you're going to trust some of these area scouts that are supposedly convincing, a guy like Michael Holmes of going after these guys and not going in the direction of the more toolsy guys, because it's really hurting their farm system, and it has for 15 years now.
Yeah, and like people were saying in the comments section, the Gavin Kilen would have made perfect sense because, like you said, you're going under slot value. So if you were able to then put those funds with your pick in the third towards a player with, more upside or bought out of the college command, whatever, then it would make sense. It's like both of you guys said, and like they're saying in the comments, the fact that they doubled down and did the exact same thing in round 1, that's where the frustration stems from, because they also don't have a pick in the 5th. I don't think a lot of fans realize that either. So you're going to get one more pick in the 4th, and then you're going to have to wait 2 rounds until the 6th to go again. And you've already taken 2 guys under slot, one that wasn't even ranked. And you're not addressing, the needs that are in your system with those early picks. Mind you, those limited early picks that you had to begin with. So, yeah, I mean, time will tell for sure. There's been a lot of comp to Joe Panic. I think Cody's going to dive in and kind of pull some numbers for a little comparison and contrast there. Yeah, I'll just let you take it away, bro, because we kind of touched on it in the green room, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get the Joe Panic comp to an extent. I actually, and one thing I will say, like, this is just from watching Keelin's game a little bit, like, I really do like his swing. Like, I just want to tell people, like, I like his swing. I like the line drive swing. I like it, there is a lot I like that I see there. Where I can see the comp to like Joe Panic is, Panic career high home runs were 10, 2 separate times. His career high in extra base hits was in 2017. He had 43. So I actually think if we want to talk ceiling for a guy like Keelin, I think peak Joe Panic, those first 2 years where he was hitting 305 as a rookie, 312 in his second year. That second year he hit 312, had an 833 OPS, 129 OPS plus. He had 37 extra base hits. Like, I view his ceiling as maybe something along those lines, but with a little bit more power. So I do think we're talking about a guy that can get between 10 to 15 homers and hit a ton of doubles, because I think he's going to have more pop than Panic to split the gap, actually get balls to the wall. Like, it's, Panic's thing was he'd hit one into the gap and, they would get cut off, or he just couldn't quite get it over a guy's head, or, he just didn't quite have that little bit extra juice. I do think that Keelan's got a little bit more. His max exit velocity in college was 110 miles per hour. Now, metal bat, we'll see what translates, but he is 21, so there is room for him to get a little bit stronger as well. But it's still like it's just kind of a limited upside. I know Ricky's going to have a couple comps that he wanted to mention, but my main thing with this pick is, if he is kind of like Panic was in 2015, and he can sustain it for 8 to 10 years and is playing Gold Glove caliber second base, because they like his glove a ton at second, although the Giants are going to try and start him at short, which makes sense from just an asset value standpoint. But if he's a Gold Glove caliber defender at second, hitting 300 plus and gives you 50 extra base power, like, of course we're all going to look back at this and be like, okay, it was a good pick, but there's limited margin for error with that kind of player. So, Ricky, what kind of comps do you have for him? I know you said you had a few.
So this is where I'm a little bit more positive, and I wouldn't even say these are necessarily the absolute ceiling type comps for a guy like Keelin. But the two, to me, and this is not based off of their swings, this is more the type of player they are Jacob Wilson and Nico Horner. If you look at their scouting grades when they came out of the draft, they're almost identical to Keelin. Keelin is an overall 55. So is Jacob Wilson. So is Nico Horner. Wilson came out with a 70 hit grade. But then when some of the similarities come across, it's Keelin was a 60 hit grade, both at 45 power, both at 50 run. Keelin has a 50 arm. Wilson had a 55 arm. Keelin was actually graded out as the better fielder than Wilson at a 55, and Wilson was a 50. And then Horner was even more similar. He came out with a 60 grade hit tool, 45 power, 55 run, 50 arm, and 50 field. So he's kind of right in the middle of both of those two guys when you look at some of their scout grades. And this is all per MLB.com. If any of you guys want to look into that further. And then you look at their college numbers, and Keelin actually not only played a lot higher level college baseball, playing in the SEC. Horner's a Stanford guy, so he played in the Pac-12. And then Wilson played in the WAC, which was when he went to Grand Canyon University. So Keelin actually showed off a lot more power, and while playing a lot harder of competition in the SEC. So that is one encouraging thing there. And that's why, like I kind of told you guys before the live, I do feel like Keelin's 45 grade power is being undersold a little bit, considering the guy just hit 15 home runs in 53 games. That's pretty damn solid for the SEC, even though it is an aluminum bat that he's using. But another thing I noticed is it's not just pull side power. You do see, if you watch Keelin, you do see him hit for power to both sides of the field, both gaps. And you really see him use the left side of the field a lot, even on just line drives and grounders. I saw him get shifted a lot too, and he would lay down bunts down the third base line, something I saw. I forget who it was in the comments earlier asking kind of jokingly if he could lay bunts down the third base line in the 10th inning. Well, he actually has done that on numerous occasions. So I think it was Rick Brown asked that. So yeah, actually he can do that. He is a pretty good bunter as well, even though he doesn't have great speed. So I feel like he's kind of in the middle of those two guys. Wilson's a hot name right now, but he's not some elite athlete by any means. He's pretty solid at shortstop, and he does steal some bags, but he's not like a big time power guy, and that's kind of how I feel Keelan's going to play out in the pros, is being more of a gap to gap guy, hitting a lot of hard line drives like Cody mentioned earlier. That's pretty much what I see. A lot of hard contact to both gaps, but I think in a place like Oracle, you should expect Keelin to be more around 10, 12, 15 homers a year. And you might see him have one of those kind of off years like Brandon Crawford, where he occasionally throws in a 20 home run season, hits a ton of homers on the road or something like that. But yeah, like you said, Cody, I do like his swing. I don't think he's some terrible player. I'm just more so not a fan of where they took him. Had they made this pick in the 20s, I'd probably feel a little bit better about it, because he is a good player. He's got a great track record. One of the only real knocks on him was just numbers he put up in the Cape Cod Summer League, which is wood bat for anybody that doesn't know. That was really the only concern, and it wasn't like he went down there against good college competition and struck out a ton. Still had 8 walks and 9 Ks down there, so he pretty much did what he was doing in college. Just in a small sample size, he hit for a little bit lower of an average. But again, that's the one thing that comes into play with a guy that's a hit tool type of guy. Mm-hmm. You cannot judge him off of small sample sizes, because he might just go through a little bit of a cold stretch that might affect those numbers. He did have 2 home runs in those 24 games in the Cape Cod League, so nothing crazy, but I wouldn't say it's anything concerning by any means. But yeah, I mean, a guy, like we said, he's not going to strike out a ton. He also isn't really going to walk a ton, and that's kind of where the Wilson comparisons come in. Jacob Wilson's a very aggressive hitter early on in counts, and like Wilson, Keelin is also a very good fastball hitter, especially when pitchers bring added velocity. That was one of his big strengths down in the SEC.
Yeah, and he's a pretty aggressive swinger, you know, in general. And he has insanely high in-zone contact rates. So, like, he'll probably won't end up drawing a ton of walks, but, you know, the plus side of that is, like you said, he's not going to strike out a ton. So it's kind of a double-edged sword on that one. And one thing I do want to, and I've been more defensive of the team in this regard than I think most do. As far as, like, I always see the comments, like, if they reach for players and things like that. And, like, I agree, like, it's not ideal. It always feels better when you take a guy that kind of fell down that was expected to go higher than taking a guy that was higher up that was expected to go lower and you took him high. But the difficult part with baseball is, like, you can't trade up or down. So if there's a guy that you like, and especially for a team like the Giants that, like, they didn't have another pick till the 3rd round. So it's not even like they could sit there and go, okay, do we think Keelan's going to get to us in the 2nd? Or if we had, like, a comp pick or something, you know, like, do we think, like, he'd last to that pick? Like, it comes down to, okay, is this our favorite guy that's in this spot? All right, then we're going to just take him, because we're not going to get to pick him if we don't. So that it's kind of the crappy thing with baseball. I wish you could kind of move a little more, and, you know, kind of like you do with the NFL, especially, where guys are like, oh, we can get this guy in 4 picks. We'll just trade down a couple spots. But, you know, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So that's the one thing that I always like to defend them a little bit on, at least. All right. Do we have anything else we want to talk about with Keelin, or can we jump right over to their 3rd round pick, Trevor Cohen?
Oh, I'm excited to talk about that one.
This will be.
Let's do it.
All right, everybody. This is a safe space. We're just we'll lead off with that. So the thing with Keelin, and yeah, a lot of us wanted them to go other routes. Like, and the funny thing with the whole below slot thing, like, I actually remember reading Ike Irish was viewed as a below slot candidate. So it's like, okay, if that's what we were going to do, like, couldn't have we gone more upside? But the big thing about going below slot is the idea is, okay, well, then you do it so that way your next pick, you can get one of those guys that fell that was expected to be a 1st rounder or, like, high 2nd or something. And normally if they get taken in the 3rd or 4th round, they're not going to end up signing because they're going to go, no, we're going to go back to school, or we're going to go to school for a high school player and chase bigger money. But then they back the pick with some guy that was unranked from Rutgers. And you know what? Might there be a case to be made that he should be ranked when you kind of look at some of his stuff? Yeah, I mean, sure, that case could be made, but the reality is he wasn't on the MLB's top 250. He wasn't on Baseball America's top 500 prospects. I think Keith Law might have had him, or maybe it was Kylie, can't think of the guy's last name, for ESPN. One of them had him at like 235. So he was listed on one of these lists. But when you're taking a guy in the 3rd round, that's also going to be probably more than likely a well below slot guy, because that guy is going to be just happy that he got taken in the 3rd round. And he is probably going to go well under slot because it's more money than he would have probably gotten in the 10th round where he maybe should have been picked. Or, I've mentioned these are the kinds of guys you take in the 6th, 7th, 8th rounds. Then, I mean, I sure hope in the 4th that we're about to take some like flame-throwing lefty high school kid that's gonna like go to Alabama otherwise, or something, or Vanderbilt otherwise. Like, I hope we're gonna go take some fringe 2nd round pick or something like that, or fringe 1st in that round, because I just don't see the plan if this is the route we're gonna go. And Posey's got a type. High contact guy. I'll pull the numbers up here in a little bit. Like, insanely high contact guy. They think he played right field, but they think he can stick in center. Good, plus speed, not necessarily like plus, but another guy with a 60 grade hit tool. Like, there are things to like, but he hit 4 home runs in 3 years of college. And Dan's going to like go harder on this, but I look at the guy and I think I don't think there's any way this guy wouldn't have been there in the 6th round. Like, honestly. So I'll turn it over to you guys, but.
So I think you're being generous. I think dude would have been there in the 8th, just to keep it a buck with you.
Yeah.
Probably the 9th. But no, to touch on your point, Buster Posey most definitely has a type. So Cody will pull up the stats, but I just pulled a few that I like. So he only struck out 62 times in 3 years at Rutgers, which is great. 15 to 25 strikeouts a season. That's incredible. I'll give him props for that. He's not a speedster by any means. So typically, at least in my opinion, if you're getting a guy who can't hit for power, like you said, he hit 4 home runs in 3 years. You at least want a guy that can drive extra base hits, get him in the gap, hit him down the line, maybe swipe a bag. He stole 40 bags in 3 years at Rutgers. I mean, he's not a sloth by any means, but he's definitely not a speedster. But the part that really stumps me with this guy is he had 223 hits in 3 seasons at Rutgers. Okay. That's great. He played like 163 games. That's great. However, only 48 of those were extra base hits. 48. So to summarize everything here, he's not a great, speedster. He's not going to swipe you a ton of bags. He has almost no pop, and he will very rarely get you an extra base hit. So he can't strike out. He'll just make contact, and that's worth moving up into the 3rd round when he wasn't expected to get drafted in general. I don't see it, man. I genuinely do not see it. So those are just a few fun stats that I saw. I mean, I don't know if this trend's going to continue tomorrow with getting guys that just, make contact with the ball and don't strike out a lot, but I hope they switch it up because this is not sustainable. Taking a guy in the 3rd who's got a very, 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 very low ceiling and a very limited floor, quite frankly. Because if, like we touched on with Keelin, if he doesn't have a high batting average, he brings almost 0 value to your team. And the stats back it up. This isn't even me hating. It's just you guys heard the stats here. So that's really just my opinion on it. I hope, something happens. Maybe he wakes up one day and he's got 60 grade speed, and he can drive him into the gap and get you, 40 extra base hits a season. I would love that. But based on, what we saw at Rutgers, the stats, the profile, all the metrics here, which we're going to dive into more, it's just an absolutely just head scratching pick. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's one of those picks where there's zero upside to it whatsoever. Either he becomes a major league player bare minimum and it's a good pick, or the more likely scenario, because it is not hard to get, or it's not easy to get to the big leagues, is he doesn't even make it, or he doesn't even make it to AAA, and it's an absolute bust, and you just reach for a guy in the third freaking round when you're already missing 2 of your top 5 picks, and you just completely shafted yourself with half of your picks in the early rounds. And then you again do not replenish your farm system when you go and trade a guy like James Tibbs, who so far was a pretty good pick for them in the middle of the first round. So I don't know. To me, I feel like it feels like it's almost a little bit of an overreaction by the Giants of taking these like heavier contact slap type hitters. Not as much with Keelin with the slap hitter type, but like they're both more of line drive guys than power guys, and it just feels like kind of an overreaction to what's going on around the game, where every team hits for a lower average and has a ton of strikeouts, when ultimately what carries your team offensively through the regular season is the home run, whether you like it or not. That is what carries teams through the regular season and gets you to the playoffs year in and year out. You look at the top 3 teams in the MLB right now in home runs. It is the Dodgers, the Yankees, and then the Cubs. All high-end offenses and all very good playoff teams and potentially World Series contenders this season. And you can look at teams like the Braves, who are consistently in the playoffs every year. All these teams have power hitting, because you know what? When your lineup is not hitting at all it takes is one swing to completely change a game. I mean, look at Luis Matos in the end of today's game. The Giants were doing nothing until the 9th inning with 1 out, and Luis Matos comes up with a pinch hit 2-run home run to tie the game at the very end. That's all it takes. But the thing is, the Giants just do not have enough of it. They went out and traded for Rafael Devers because they have no power. And the problem is with the Giants is you're not getting either end. You're getting very little power from your entire team, and you're not getting very good contact hitting. You have a handful of guys who strike out way too much and don't hit for nearly as much power as they should for how much they strike out. Ultimately, if you're going to be a guy that strikes out like 29-30% of the time, it shouldn't be that hard for you to get to 20 home runs. Like, there needs to be more of a ceiling here. And the thing is, I hear a lot of people say, oh, the Giants need like a Steven Kwan type to set the table and make better contact. And while a guy like him would be a huge addition, getting a lineup full of those type of guys isn't going to help you either, because then it's going to be exactly like we had under Farhan, where you have a ton of guys who are just taking a crap ton of walks, and you're just clogging the bases with nobody that can come through with the big hit or the big home run to win a game for you. These are the type of teams that scratch and claw 1 or 2 runs in a game across, or they get the bases loaded with no outs, and all they end up getting is 1 run off of a sac fly. That's what you end up getting when you draft a bunch of guys like this. So I don't know. I really hope the philosophy is a little bit different going forward in the continuation of the draft tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, one disclaimer, I don't want to sit here and sound like someone that doesn't think Cohen can be a good player, because I do. I do think like he has some tools that are really solid, and obviously the power stands out, or the lack of power. But you guys saw it kind of briefly pop up here. Like, he has a little bit of something in the bat. Like, I mean, even with the metal bats, 110, almost 111 mile per hour max EV, like, is solid. The problem is for him, his average launch angle is like negative 1.3 degrees. Like, he pounds the ball into the ground a ton. And it's an awful similar kind of thought to like Austin Slater when he got drafted. And I know we don't like to say that name around here, but that was kind of the thing with him was, solid speed, good bat to ball skills, just doesn't elevate it enough, but he hits for a high average, which, we can look at that two ways. Like, either this guy is going to start, trying to chase launch angle to go with the pop, and it's going to make his bat to ball skills go to crap, or he's just possibly going to be a guy that just hits a ton of hard balls that are singles, and that's going to cap his value a little bit. And I have no problem with, this kind of player if you take him in the 7th or 8th round. Like, I really don't. But that's kind of where I struggle with it in the 3rd. But I did want to share this, though. You can see I mentioned it earlier, elite bat to ball skills, an 8.6% in zone whiff rate and 11.4 total. Doesn't chase a ton. So that, like, there are good things with this guy. Obviously the run, they gave him a 55 grade, 55 field. I know some scouts were talking that actually liked that, like, loved this pick, said, some of the best bat to ball skills in the entire draft. Kid rakes. A lot of them think he can stick at center field. So, like, there is some upside there, but the power is going to have to show at least a little more to really have any kind of, like, I think, projectable ceiling with him.
Did you actually see why he was moved to the corners in the outfield? Did you guys see that?
I don't know too much about the player that replaced him, but the guy's name was like Peyton Bonds or something like that.
Yeah, it was Barry's nephew.
Yeah.
So Barry's nephew was playing center field. So they're saying that's really the only reason why he was moved to the corners. So that's why they're kind of saying that he's a guy that should be able to continue playing center field as long as somebody's not blocking him. Now, we'll see where he gets slated if he ends up spending any kind of time down in San Jose at the end of this season, if they start making some promotions, or if he just ends up staying down in the ACL. But it should be interesting because the Giants do have a few guys in San Jose that are playing center field right now. So some room will definitely have to be opened up if they're going to put him there. And honestly, same could be said for Keelin too, because they say they're going to be playing him at shortstop at least to start, and then they may move him to second base later on. And we've already kind of seen guys like Walker Martin move over to third base and second base and kind of move around a little bit. Doesn't look like he's really going to stick there, but you do have Maui Ahuna down there who's taking a lot of the reps at short now. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it affects the lower levels and see what kind of moves they make down there once all the draft stuff gets wrapped up and they get the guys in-house down in Arizona.
If they do go down to San Jose, me and Ricky will be there to judge in person. Not sure if they'd want to interview with us, but we'll absolutely watch their game.
Maybe it's
we'll play nice.
Yeah,
exactly.
Going back to Cohen, though, somebody he kind of reminded me a little bit of from the pro side when I was watching his swing is kind of like a Nick Markakis from back in the day. If you guys remember him on the Orioles and the Braves, just like a very short, compact lefty swing built for contact and line drives. Markakis did hit for a little bit of power early on in his career, but that's really the type of guy he was when he went to Atlanta later on. Was always kind of in the single digits with home runs, but always hit for a high average, just very steady bat. And their swings are very similar in how they set up. They have short swings and they don't really take their hands super far back. They keep them pretty upright. So if you guys get a chance and you look at him and then you look at Cohen, Cohen did a little showcase down in Arizona with all the other draft prospects, and there's definitely some similarities there for sure.
Yeah. For anyone wondering, Nick Markakis was a career 288 hitter. He did hit 189 home runs, but career 288 hitter in a 15-year career. I think if Trevor Cohen plays 15 years and hits almost 290, I think all of us will send out an apology letter to Buster Posey.
And with him, I'm not obviously saying he's going to be anything like that. It's just more the swing is very similar, for sure, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and Markakis spent a lot of time in hitters' yards almost his whole career, so he had some very favorable environments to hit home runs. And like I said, most of them were early on in his career. He wasn't like a consistent 20, 25 home run guy or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, if he turned into Nick Markakis, I will make a hand-signed apology letter.
Yeah, no doubt.
We'll all show up to Oracle for a game that just has like a sign that says "We're idiots" and it has like 3 arrows pointing. Yeah, no, I do think, because I start a thing here, and I have another thing I want to ask you guys about. We'll end up wrapping this up here soon because it's just a kind of a quick one today. But Daniel earlier said, I think something you might want to touch on is Posey's a very conservative dude. He admitted as much prior to the season, telling us how much his former agent likes to take chances, as in he needs that. And yeah, I mean, I think you can see it a bit with these picks, obviously. Like they are high floor players. But I don't think Posey doesn't want to get superstars. Like with the Devers trade, clearly going and signing Adames, he wants to get these high end players, and getting the Chapman deal, the extension done. He wants these high end guys. He wants superstars. He understands that. And I think the one thing that he also wants, though, is he recognizes we can't just have superstars and then have 4 dudes that are terrible in their lineup with those guys. You still need to have good baseball players filling out the lineup. So I don't know if maybe he's thinking I want to just fill my system with good baseball players. Maybe their ceilings aren't what we would want, but guys that just hit, they play the game the right way. So maybe that's kind of the idea here. I don't, as we've well documented tonight, I don't necessarily agree with the philosophy early in a draft, but yeah, I just thought that was a good point by Daniel.
I mean, yes, but on the flip side with that, one could argue that it's a massive risk taking a guy in the 3rd round that wasn't even projected to go top 500, because then you're banking on, okay, I need this guy to show out to justify the value in this pick. And if he completely flops and fails, that makes you look even worse than it did on draft day. So I could definitely see both sides to that point.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's the Devers trade. And I also think we've already seen in a short period of time regarding Posey being conservative that he is extremely competitive, and I don't necessarily agree with that, because he has shown he is not just gonna sit on his hands and just be like, well, we're just gonna have to ride it out. We're gonna ride it out for a full 162, and if we lose, we lose. These are the guys we're rolling with every day, and I'm not gonna do anything different, because their biggest hole in the offseason was shortstop, and they needed to add to the rotation. He did both of those things. And then when Matt Chapman went down and the lineup was hurting, even before Matt Chapman went out, it was very clear they needed more thump in their lineup. And he went and got a guy that nobody thought was going to get traded at that exact time, at this part in the season. So yes and no. I think this may come down more to Posey and company wanting a high floor college bat that, maybe this is a guy that they believe can actually move through the system quick and help give them depth in the middle infield within a year and a half, 2 years. Going back on Jacob Wilson, the guy got drafted in 2023, spent that little bit of time in the majors in 2023 after getting drafted. went back to the minors in 2024 and came up later on in the 2024 season. So he didn't even really spend a full year down in the minors. So if you have a guy like Keelin that just absolutely rakes, they might be on board with, moving a guy very quickly like that if he shows out. I mean, they have said they're not afraid to move guys if they're dominant at that level. So it is possible that that's what they believe will happen with Keelin. But I mean, at 21 years old in college, it's not like he's some extremely old player or anything like that. But you also do want this pick to help you out. Within 2 to 3 years would be really ideal if possible.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
We will see.
Yeah. All right. So my last little exercise I want to do here. I'm not going to go on. Cohen. I mean, he's probably going to be in like maybe top 15 prospects, top 20 when they put out the list or when they update it with the draft guys. But where do you guys think that Keelin is going to end up whenever they update and they add the new draftees in? I'm looking at Baseball America's list now. I disagree with this list a little bit. I would actually reorganize these 6 players, but the top 6 I think are consensus top 6 for any Giants fan. Number 1, Baseball America's got Bryce Eldridge. Number 2, Joshua Gonzalez. Number 3, Carson Wisenhunt. Number 4, Bo Davidson. Number 5, Johnny Level. Number 6, Dakota Jordan. My personal rankings, I actually have Dakota at 2, Bo at 3, Joshua at 4, and then I would have probably Wisenhunt at 5, and then Johnny Level at 6. But where do you guys think is he fall? Because I do think he's going to fall personally. I think he's going to fall ahead of anybody else in their system. But do you guys think he slots in somewhere between those guys, or do you think he's going to just fall in at like number 7?
I think due to his, him being the first round pick and being number 13 overall, by default, that's going to probably propel him into the top 5. But me personally, I would probably put him somewhere in like the 7 through 9 range.
Because right now our 7 through 9, just so you know, is Diego Velasquez, Joe Whitman, and Argenis Kayama. So I do think he's ahead of those guys, at least for now. I mean, Kayama, a lot of people love his upside, but he's in Arizona still.
Yeah, that's why I say 7 through 9 was where I would put him.
Yeah,
right in that mix of players. But realistically, he'll likely slot in the top 5.
I mean, just looking at the list, it is a little tough because, like you said, I would not have our guys ranked the way they are currently. Where do I think they're going to put him? I mean, they're probably going to put him anywhere from like 2 to 4, I would say. I mean, there's no way in hell I would see him passing Bryce, but I mean, I wouldn't really be that shocked if he leapfrogs Wisenhunt, because Wisenhunt isn't even a top 100 guy, like at least by MLB.com. But yeah, I don't know. I'd probably, if we go off of Bryce, Carson Wisenhunt, Joshua, Johnny Level, and Dakota Jordan, I'd probably put him in that like 4 to 6 range. But I do think he's going to be more like 2, 3, or 4, somewhere in there, more than likely, because he's probably, based on where they had him ranked, he's probably just outside of, like, on the MLB.com top 100 after they plug in all the new draftees. I would say they probably throw him in like the 120s if they actually went that far down.
Yeah, that's
probably where he would fall. So me personally, I think Joshua should be in the top 100. So I feel like, I feel like he'd be right after him somewhere in there. And then if he does really well in the Giants system this year before the end of the minor league season, I could see him being one of those fringe top 100 guys right after this season ends.
Yeah. I'm going to just go off my personal rankings. I don't know where they're going to put him with, because Baseball America is going to reshuffle the other guys as well. as well. MLB Pipeline, Baseball America, all those publishers, they're gonna shuffle these guys anyway after the season. Baseball America's already done it like twice during the season. It's a chance they do it again like in a month anyway. When they do add these players in, me personally, I would probably have them 5th. I do think Carson's dropped a little bit for me, and Johnny Level, I would have him in front of Level for right now, only until I see Johnny in San Jose. If they do move Johnny up to San Jose and Johnny just tears it up in San Jose as an 18-year-old for the last 5-6 weeks, he is 100% jumping him. But that's kind of where I would stand at the moment, is I'd tentatively have him in at 5th behind, but I cannot put him ahead of Bryce, Dakota, or Bo or Joshua. Like, those guys have another level of tools and ceiling that, and Joshua hasn't yet in the Dominican. Well, he's doing it in the Dominican, but he hasn't yet done it stateside at like higher level pro ball. But the other 3 guys have. So like, I couldn't justify putting him ahead of those 4 in my opinion. But
yeah, I think my reservation comes from I need to see him in San Jose show off a little bit of power first. If I start seeing the power in single A with the San Jose Giants, then I'm pretty comfortable with him being above Level, because he's going to be more advanced than Johnny Level. Johnny Level is just very young, even for the level he's at right now, and he's definitely overachieving. But he's hitting for a ton of power down there. What does he have? 7 or 8 home runs right now down in the ACL. So
complex league or something like that.
Yeah. So he's got a good amount of homers down there, and I feel like that's going to translate to San Jose. So I just kind of want our first rounder to show that off in San Jose before the minor league season ends this year, and that will kind of help us, I feel like, gauge where to plug him in that probably somewhere in that lower end of the top 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to stop it for tonight. Like I said, it was just kind of an extra one. We wanted to keep this shorter. We actually ran it a little longer than we were expecting to. I think we were trying to aim for like 45 minutes on this, but definitely had a lot to say on these picks. There are like nearly 300 people watching this. I think most of these are in X at the moment, but for anybody that does enjoy the content, please do hop over to the YouTube side, hit that like, hit that subscribe. That's kind of the main spot for channel growth. We will get this posted over on Spotify either tonight or tomorrow morning. I'll get that added over. The plan is still to have the minor league update on Tuesday. We probably aren't going to put out one of these tomorrow for like day 2 coverage. There's a ton of picks. We're doing the Thursday live show. We'll fish through all the picks, and we'll kind of pick out a couple guys that stood out to us that we really liked. Hopefully there's a few in there. But we'll save that for Thursday. But yeah, I mean, that's all I got. You guys got anything you want to say before we hop off?
Here's to higher ceiling players tomorrow, fellas.
Speed and power. Speed and power.
Or some high velo arms.
Yeah. Yeah, or explosive arms. Yeah.
Above slot value.
Yeah.
That should be the chant. That should be the chant right there.
For anybody still in here, I joked with Cody and Dan earlier. The Giants are going to have the most overpaid 8th round draft pick in MLB history with all this money they're saving.
Yeah. How about a catcher?
Amen, Alex. Amen.
Seriously.
Yes.
There's a couple guys out there that they could be eyeing with their 4th and 6th round picks. So keep an eye out for that.
Did you guys see? I was gonna say, did you guys see my badge yet? Nobody's pointed it out.
Oh yeah,
I saw it.
Yeah, I saw it before.
I'm still sad about it though.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna become an Orioles fan because they just draft every player I want every year.
Dude,
and
they have
a loaded
system
system of hitters.
Their first round was insane.
They drafted Irish, who we wanted. They drafted Aloy, who we wanted, and then they took Honeycutt last year, and then
Bodine this year.
Yep. They took one of the catchers we wanted.
Yeah, who I mentioned. I knew they weren't going to take him 13.
Listen. I know the three of us spoke it into existence that we wanted those 4 guys in black and orange, but on this side of the country,
Yeah.
we manifested.
They also took, what was it, 2 years ago now, I think they took Enrique Bradfield too.
Mhm.
So they have tons of guys that we have talked about on this show.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, can we just swap farm systems here? Theirs isn't as good as it used to be, but they take a lot of toolsy, high ceiling hitters, and that is what we need to do.
I think we can all confirm now with 100% certainty that the Baltimore Orioles scouting department are avid viewers of the Even Your Dynasty show.
Is it
It's
Mike
confirmed.
Elias that's still the Povo? He just got our YouTube on while he's in his draft room. Just
Drop a comment and thank us, Michael.
Going into the first round, they don't even do a big board. They just pull the show up, and they're like, that's who we're taking. If he's available, we're taking that one. If they mention anybody else, that's our backup.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. All right, everybody, thanks for hopping in. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's still a fun time. It's always a fun time hopping on talking Giants baseball, even when it's not necessarily what we were wishing we were getting to hype up. But you know, we're gonna be rooting for these guys just like all you guys are, and hopefully they end up being good Giants. But other than that, you know, enjoy the 4 days off of baseball if you can do that. I mean, I guess you can watch the home run derby and all-star game, but you know, who cares? Other than that, we'll be back with another live show on Thursday. See you guys.